In 37 seasons, I've never seen a car crash quite like this. Global Allstars is one of the most confusing, infuriating, and despised seasons by the fandom that I have seen since becoming a fan of the show. While upon the initial reveal of its existence, it seemed sort of superfluous by most fans, everyone seemed pretty willing to give it a shot considering how well liked UK vs. the World 2 and Canada vs. the World 2 both were. Giving these international artists a huge platform where they get to show off their drag in front of RuPaul and the world sounded like a great positive thing for the show. But rather than taking from what worked in both of those versus the world seasons, they took from what fans hated from them and amplified them even more so. So today we're going to talk about Global Allstars, why it's not working, and potentially what production might have been thinking. Like I mentioned, UK and Canada vs. the World have had some rocky receptions. The first season of UK vs. the World was pretty hated by fans, but less so because of production and more so because of the short episode count and atrocious elimination order. Canada vs. the World 1 was decent but unmemorable. But both of their second seasons were huge hits. In particular, UK 2 showed that they were invested in the non-English franchise queens, such as Marina and La Grande Dame, and it became the first and only season of Versus the World to feature a non-English franchise queen in the finale. I'm going to be talking a lot about the English franchises, the Ru franchises, the non-Ru franchises, so just so everyone's aware, the English franchises of the show I'm considering as US, UK, Canada, and Down Under. And the Ru seasons, the Ru girls, would be Kween, Alyssa, and Kitty. Everyone else is from a season that either does not have any English or has some too little English in them, such as the Philippines. But this is going to be a big talking point of this season, so I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page about that. Going back to UK versus the World 2 being the only versus the World season to have a non-English speaking franchise queen in the finale was a huge issue for fans because these versus the World seasons were not really being that worldly. Out of the 38 queens to be featured on a versus the World season, only 7 are from a non-English franchise. That's only 18%. And of those 7, only 2 made it to the finale. So when Global Allstars was announced to have a cast of 12 queens from around the world, 1 queen from each franchise, people were extremely excited. Getting to see a global cast that is actually global and delivered on its promise was a huge step up from the casting of the Versus the World seasons. But there was also a group of people, myself included, that were asking why Global Allstars was needed in the first place when Versus the World already exists. Can't we just improve upon the casting of those seasons rather than making an entirely new franchise? For fans who aren't watching every season and following every season, trying to follow all of the new franchises and series can be confusing, and this seemed like it was confusing for no good reason. Regardless, just the idea of getting to see 12 queens from around the world representing their countries in the Olympics of drag was extremely exciting and had people invested from the jump for the season. And then, once the cast was announced, people were even more excited. 10 out of the 12 queens featured were finalists from their seasons, with Alyssa and Tessa being the 2 outliers. But Alyssa is Alyssa fucking Edwards, and Tessa is an icon in her own right. So overall, this casting was 10 out of 10 no notes. Now, just to be transparent, this video is coming from someone who has not seen every franchise. I only watch US, UK, and Canada, but I also have watched the Versus the World seasons, and I keep up with what's going on in the international franchises. But going in, I did not know many of these queens, just for transparency's sake. But the idea of getting to see all of these iconic queens I've missed from other franchises was extremely exciting to me, and I know many other people have the same kind of watch experience as me coming into this season. The show couldn't go in expecting every viewer to have seen all of these girls' original seasons, and I think actually a very small portion of the fandom watch everything. We can't all be Black Boy. So, things that I was hoping for coming in were good introductions to the queens so that the audience got to know them, highlighting and informing us about the different types of drag around the world and what makes each special, and judging that would not just highlight the queens from the more popular franchises. So none of that happened. A huge worry for me coming into the season was that Alyssa, Kitty, Kween, and Pythia would be getting a huge push since they come from very popular franchises, and 3/4 of them have already been judged by RuPaul already. We'll get into this later, but I mean, my worries were 100% justified. I was also worried about the challenges that they might be given. The English proficiency would not be even across the cast, so it seems unfair to include challenges where those who speak English would be at a severe advantage. I was really hoping the season would put an emphasis more on the drag and include more challenges like balls and designing and makeovers and performances and less comedy-based challenges. I was impressed early on in the season where there did seem to be a lack of comedy challenges, but it just seems like they all came later as episodes 5, 7, and 8 are all comedy challenges. Now, if you have a season of International Queens where everyone is pretty damn proficient in English, then this isn't really an issue. But there are queens on this season that you can tell aren't as strong in their English as others. And, you know, I run an international drag competition show too, and these are things that we think about. Now, granted, a vast majority of our cast are very fluent in English, but there has to be thought behind this, especially since a majority of Global All-Stars does not have English as their first language. Unfortunately, it just feels like they threw these international queens into the same formula structure they've given in every other All-Star season and been like, figure it out, queen. And I think that's another negative I have of this season. This is a new franchise and an opportunity to bring something very new to the show. This is the worldwide Olympics of drag. They could be giving out like gold, silver, bronze medals. They could be testing a different drag talent each week. They could have done so many fun ideas to make this just feel different from every other Drag Race season. And instead, it's just the same old formula, just on a different stage. I would have loved to see the formula change, and not even like the twists of like, oh, they're sending each other home or whatever. Just like make the show feel different, because this season is very different. But that's not what we got. But one major plus for the season is the production and the set. This main stage is fantastic. The workroom is one of the best we've ever seen. You can tell so much work went into making this season feel grand and special from the production design perspective. And I give all of those production designers major props. They did an incredible job. Another aspect that has me scratching my head a little bit is the judging panel. I wish it was more diverse. Yes, they've had the Javis on, and Graham Norton will be on next week, but all three of the main judges are American. I wish they could have brought Supreme or Mama Pow or Nikki Doll, Pangina. Like, there are so many incredible options of hosts and judges from around the globe from these franchises, and I feel like they're not doing a good job of highlighting them or even bringing them in. Even if it was just like Ru and Michelle with two rotating judges that were hosts from other franchises, I really think that having some more international representation on the panel could have helped. Alyssa, Kitty, and Kween have the advantage of Ru and Michelle already judging them and knowing their drag and knowing what to expect. And it would have been nice for some of the international girls to have more of an opportunity for that too. Like, even the Javis being there is odd since there's no España queen on the season. And Graham next week is like, oh wow, add another judge who's judged and adores Kitty Scott Claus. Like, it's very unbalanced and unfair. And if I was a queen from a franchise not hosted by Ru, I would be very concerned by that. And so I do think that there is some bias happening, whether it be implicit or explicit, for the queens that Ru and Michelle have judged before. Out of the 8 wins given out so far, 5 of them were given to Ru girls, with one of the others being given to Pythia, another queen from an English franchise. And then Of the 2 wins that went to an international queen, one of them went to Vanity on an episode where the 3 Rue girls were not competing, and the last went to Tessa, who Rue and the producers clearly love. Rue and Michelle adored Kitty and Alyssa and Kween on their original seasons, and they've never met the other 9 girls before in their lives. So of course there's going to be, familiarity and camaraderie with those 3 that they simply won't have with the other queens. Now, we have seen this not really matter, like on UK vs. the World 2, where pretty immediately Rue and Michelle fell in love with Marina Summers and LeGrand Dame. But I would also argue that they didn't really have many favorites that they knew on that season. Scarlet Envy, Mayhem Miller, Gothy Kendall, and Theresa May, they didn't really seem to care for on their original seasons. The queens they loved on their first seasons were Tia Coffey and Hannah Conda, and they both ended up making the finale with Marina and LeGrand Dame. And then looking at UK vs. the World 1, Baga, Mo Hart, Jujubee, they were all favorites from their previous seasons for Rue and Michelle, and all 3 made it to the finale. So I do think that when they're judging queens they already know and love next to queens that they've never encountered before, there will be some bias that comes into play. That's why bringing in judges from other franchises evens out the playing field at least a little bit more. Another major fault of the season is one I actually think they might be fixing in real time, and that is the episode runtime. This is how long the first 7 episodes of the season are. They start out pretty damn short, but once people started complaining about the runtimes, they started to go back up to what you would expect. For comparison, here's the average lengths of episodes for some other recent seasons of Drag Race. I really think having those first few episodes be so short was a massive blow to the season. We saw how it affected season 15 when they went down to shorter episodes and how much stuff we missed out on, how many queens we barely knew anything about, and especially on an all-star season like this where you want to feature everyone well, and it feels like so many of the early outs we barely knew and we barely saw. Athena and Soa and Eva, they all basically had no storyline and barely any screen time during their time on the show because they had to flesh out the main characters of the season instead. But besides the runtimes, the editing is also not great. I don't know which editing team from which program they're using or if it's a new one altogether, but the editing of this season is extremely sloppy and awkward. Scenes will just cut to something else out of nowhere. The coming up segments feel really weird. There isn't a natural flow to the season like a lot of other seasons have. It's just very choppy and awkward in general. And for a season like this, wouldn't you want the creme de la creme of editors to make sure this is as good as it can be? Just look at Canada versus the World 2. The editing of that season was incredible. I truly think they did a fantastic job of balancing all the queens and their storylines to make for a very satisfying narrative on the season. This season, I feel like I can point out a few storylines, but everything else just feels very random and thrown together. I think editing this season was going to be very hard because it's not like a regular All-Stars where most of the queens knew each other coming in and have history. Almost everyone on this season is meeting each other for the first time, and trying to put together chemistry and narratives for that can be difficult, but they should just have gotten a better team of editors to get the job done. No shade to them, but this just isn't at the level of editing we're expecting for a huge international season like this. And it feels like the editors and the producers are telling 2 completely different stories. I am not the first person to point this out. I've seen other people online talking about it, but I do want to break it down a bit. It seems to me like the production favorites are Kitty, Alyssa, Kween, and Tessa. But the editors' favorites are Nehellenia, Vanity, Pythia, and Gala. All of the latter 4 have gotten plenty of time to talk about their struggles, their issues outside of the competition, and we've gotten to know them pretty well at this point, despite not all of them doing great in the competition. Kitty, they literally only show when she has something nasty to say. Like, she has said a lot of pretty nasty things on this season, but usually an editor would balance that out with heartfelt moments or getting to know her better, getting to see her perspective, like with Plain Jane. But there is none of that. This is a very clear as day villain edit, if I've ever seen one. Alyssa kind of has no storyline, except that she's annoyed at being safe and then keeps saying she's going to do better the next week, and then she's like safe again. And her storyline with Tessa is more to give Tessa something in the edit than to add anything to Alyssa's storyline. Kween has a bit less of a villain edit than Kitty, but we still haven't gotten to know much about Kween, and they cut to her for a lot of shady moments. Based on the edit, the audience is supposed to feel bad for Nellie, who is constantly getting vitriol thrown at her by Kitty and Kween especially, but some of the other girls too, both to her face and in confessional. So while the producers are really trying to push and highlight Kitty and Kween, the edit is making us not want to root for them at all. So it's making for a really odd viewing experience. Right now, those are the two queens doing the absolute best in the competition, but the audience isn't meant to like either of them from the edit. And it just makes for a weird viewing experience. Think back to season 5, where you have Roxy and Detox and, some of the other queens versus Jinx. There's a push and pull because Jinx is doing incredible on the season, and so is Roxy. So when Roxy is going after Jinx, then Roxy gets her comeuppance when Jinx does incredible in a challenge and is winning challenges and being in the top left and right. That's the push and pull. You're getting that satisfaction at the end of the episode when Roxy's saying mean things to Jinx, but then Jinx does a good job. This season, it's like Kitty and Kween are being mean to Nellie, and then Kitty and Kween win the challenge every week, and Nellie's won nothing. So there isn't that push and pull and balance. It's just Nellie's getting dogpiled, and the people that are doing the dogpiling are also eating up the season. It just isn't satisfying to watch. Also, the editors are leaving in some pretty culturally insensitive moments, like the margarita pizza bit and Kween telling Gala she smells like tacos. These moments very easily could have been edited out and no one would have ended up looking bad. Especially on this season, I think it's important to avoid the stereotypes and the insensitive language, and it seems like instead the edit is highlighting it from those examples. But the edit isn't saying they're wrong for this. The edit is saying, haha, isn't that so funny? Margarita pizza. It's the funniest thing you've ever heard in your life, right? Saying that Gala smells like tacos? Oh my god, so funny. I understand leaving it in if you're then going to condemn it, but the show isn't condemning it. It's saying this is comedy. This is the peak of comedy. Rue begging everyone on her hands and knees to play stereotypes in the Snatch Game. It's crazy. It's crazy. Drag Race is not the most culturally sensitive show. We see Rue pushing stereotypes all the time, but on this season, really, it's just not a cute message for the show to be trying to send. So not only are Kitty and Kween leaving a bad taste in people's mouths because of the mean things that they're saying about the other queens, specifically Nellie, but they're also saying culturally insensitive things, which stings even harder on this season. And I'm not trying to lead a hate train on Kitty and Kween. I actually really liked both of them in their original seasons, but this edit is rough. This is a rough edit for both of them. And because those are the two main threats at this point in the competition, it just does not leave a good taste in the mouth of viewers when that doesn't change each week. Each week we see a different non-Rue girl go home, while Kitty and Alyssa have both been saved from lip syncing at this point. So overall, we're more than halfway through the season, and poor editing, tone-deaf production favorites, and some infuriating riggery and favoritism has led to this being the most hated season yet, looking at IMDB scores. I mean, these scores are abysmal, and with only a few episodes left on the season, it's unclear if they will be able to turn the tides. At this point, people don't even really want a season 2. Drag Race fumbled the bag here, much like they did on Allstars 9, and I think we're going to need to see a stellar season 17 and Allstars 10, or people will continue to drop the main series and focus more on the international franchises that they like much more. especially with Thailand coming back finally. There are plenty of options. España, France, and the Philippines especially are beloved by their fans, and I think they'll continue to find success and acclaim as more people come to join in that party, leaving RuPaul behind. But let me know what you think of this season. I know it's getting a lot of hate, but I'm sure that there are people who love it. So if you're enjoying the season, I want to know why. Tell us in the comments. And also, yes, the edits of Kitty and Kween have been abysmal. They have definitely said some culturally insensitive things, but let's keep the comments cute, please. It's very sad to me that this season is turning into what it is, because I really do think this could have been a fantastic platform to highlight some incredible drag talent from around the world, but instead, they just want to highlight the queens that Ru already likes. So I'm going to keep watching to see how this finishes out, but I am very, very excited for Dragula. I am very, very excited for UK6, and I'm very, very excited for Drag Duel Season 2, which just had its promo drop this week. So go follow those iconic performers. We have a drag king from Poland. We have David Puck, who is a British drag artist now living in Brooklyn. We have Lana V from Serbia. And we have some awesome talent from the US as well. Season 2 is going to be bigger and better than ever, so please, please go support those artists and our little show. It would very much be appreciated. If you are not already, make sure you are subscribed, and the links to all of my social media is in the description down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.